Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The letter arrived. Some letters don't just bring information, they quietly divide your life into before and after. When I found a white hospital envelope waiting in my mailbox on a cool Tuesday morning in Ohio, my hand suddenly felt too heavy to lift it. My name was printed neatly across the front. No explanation. No bright brochure inside. Just the hospital logo staring back at me as if it already knew something I didn't. If you've ever smiled while secretly expecting bad news, stay with me. Because what happened after I opened that letter changed the way I looked at my marriage, my children, my health. And even the simple English words I thought I already understood. I wish I could tell you I opened it immediately, but I didn't. Instead, I carried it into the kitchen and placed it beside my coffee mug. The morning sunlight filled our small American home, and everything looked perfectly normal. My youngest daughter was laughing while trying to toast frozen waffles. My husband was searching for his car keys, pretending not to panic even though he was already late for work. Outside, our quiet neighborhood looked peaceful. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A delivery truck rolled slowly past our mailbox. Life kept moving as if that envelope meant absolutely nothing. But I couldn't stop looking at it. The hospital's blue logo reminded me of every appointment we'd had during the past year. Regular checkups. Blood tests. A follow-up visit that the doctor had described as probably routine. That word, probably, had followed me for weeks. Probably is such a strange word. It sounds comforting until your brain decides to imagine every possible disaster hiding behind it. I picked up the envelope, then put it back down again. My phone buzzed with a reminder from the English learning app one used every morning. The phrase of the day appeared across the screen, take a deep breath. I laughed quietly because it felt like the phone was talking directly to me. I repeated the sentence aloud several times, slowly and clearly. Take a deep breath. Funny how practicing simple English sometimes helped organize my thoughts better than trying to be brave. Living in the United States has taught me that hospitals communicate differently than many people expect. Test results often arrive through secure online portals, emails, phone calls, or letters. Sometimes a letter is only paperwork. Sometimes it's a reminder. Sometimes it's a bill that makes your heart race before your eyes even reach the numbers. My neighbor once joked that every hospital envelope has two jobs, delivering information and testing your blood pressure before you even open it. I laughed when she said it. I wasn't laughing now. Psychologists often explain that uncertainty creates more stress than certainty. Research has shown that the human brain tends to imagine worst-case scenarios whenever information is incomplete. Looking back, I believe that was exactly what happened to me. The unopened envelope became far more frightening than the facts hidden inside it. Every minute I delayed opening it, my imagination quietly wrote another terrifying version of the story. I slipped the envelope into my purse instead of opening it. Maybe later, I told myself. Maybe after lunch. Maybe after I picked up the kids from school. Maybe when my husband came home. Every excuse sounded reasonable, but deep inside I knew I wasn't avoiding the paper. I was avoiding the possibility that life might suddenly become different. That afternoon, I drove across town under a bright summer sky. American flags fluttered outside local businesses. Children rode bicycles through the neighborhood park. Everything around me looked wonderfully ordinary, and somehow that made the mystery feel even heavier. I kept touching my purse at every red light just to make sure the letter was still there, almost as if it were quietly breathing beside me. When I finally parked outside the grocery store, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital. I froze. My finger hovered over the green answer button. And then the voice on the other end said something that made the unopened letter far more important than I had ever imagined. The voice on the phone. Mrs. Carter? Before you open the letter, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Those were the first words I heard, and suddenly the parking lot around me disappeared. The shopping carts, the families walking into the grocery store, the children laughing near the entrance, everything faded into silence. My heart was beating so loudly that I almost missed the next sentence. For one terrifying moment, I was certain the hospital already knew something that would change my family's future forever. But the truth waiting behind that phone call was stranger than anything I had imagined. I swallowed hard and answered as calmly as I could. Yes. This is Emily. My voice sounded steady, but my hands were shaking so much that I nearly dropped my phone. The woman on the other end spoke slowly and kindly, exactly the way nurses often do when they know someone is nervous. I appreciated every clear word because I was trying to understand not only the meaning but also the pronunciation. Listening carefully had become part of my daily English practice. Although I had never expected one of my biggest lessons to arrive through a hospital call. She confirmed my date of birth, my address, and the date of my last appointment. Then she paused. That pause felt endless. You should review the letter as soon as possible, she said gently. If you have any questions after reading it, please call us back. Nothing more. No explanation. No hint. Just polite professionalism. I wanted to ask, is everything okay? The question sat on the tip of my tongue, but fear held it there. Sometimes we hesitate because we're afraid the answer might destroy the little hope we still have. So instead, I thanked her, ended the call, and remained sitting inside my car while people around me continued their ordinary afternoon. Across the parking lot, I noticed an elderly couple loading groceries into their trunk. They smiled at each other over something completely ordinary. And for a second I wondered how many invisible worries every family carried without anyone else noticing. We often believe we're the only ones living with uncertainty, yet every smiling face may be protecting a private storm. My English learning app sent another notification. Today's listening exercise included the phrase, "Don't assume before you know the facts." I actually laughed out loud. It sounded less like an English lesson and more like advice from life itself. I repeated the sentence several times while watching the words appear on my screen. Simple vocabulary. Powerful meaning. Psychologists often explain that the brain naturally fills missing information with negative possibilities because uncertainty activates our survival instincts. In other words, when we don't know the truth, our imagination often becomes far scarier than reality. Sitting alone in that parking lot, I realized I had already invented dozens of frightening stories without reading a single line inside the envelope. I finally reached into my purse and held the letter again. The paper felt surprisingly thick. I noticed a second page inside. Why would a routine hospital letter need multiple pages? My breathing became slower, but my curiosity grew stronger. I decided not to open it in the crowded parking lot. Instead, I drove home, placed the envelope on the dining table, and waited until the house became quiet that evening. My husband looked at me with concern but didn't pressure me. He simply squeezed my hand and whispered, "Whatever it says, we'll face it together." His words gave me enough courage to slide one finger beneath the sealed edge. The envelope opened with a soft tearing sound. I slowly pulled out the first page. Then something unexpected slipped onto the table before I even began reading, and the color drained from my face. What fell out first? Before my eyes could read a single sentence, something slipped out of the envelope and landed on the table with a soft tap. It wasn't another medical report. It wasn't a bill. It was a plastic hospital identification card with my name printed across it and the words "Follow-up Patient Services." My heartbeat instantly doubled. Why would they send me this before explaining anything? My husband looked at me, then at the unopened pages in my trembling hands. Neither of us spoke. Sometimes silence is louder than bad news, and in that moment, our quiet dining room felt heavier than any hospital waiting room. I slowly turned the card over. On the back was a phone number, a barcode, and one short sentence: "Please bring this card to your next visit." The words sounded simple, yet my imagination immediately transformed them into something frightening. Next visit. Why another visit? Had the doctors discovered something during my last examination? Was there a mistake? Was someone trying not to alarm me over the phone? My husband gently reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "Emily," he said softly, "read the letter first. Don't let your fears write the story before the paper does." His words stopped me. He was right. Fear had been speaking much louder than facts. I unfolded the first page carefully. The hospital logo appeared at the top, followed by my name and the familiar greeting, "Dear Mrs. Carter." I took a deep breath, just like the English phrase I had practiced only hours earlier. Take a deep breath. Funny how a simple sentence repeated during language practice suddenly became useful in real life. The first paragraph thanked me for completing my recent health screening. So far, everything sounded ordinary. The next sentence explained that one of my routine test results required additional evaluation to provide a clearer picture. I froze again. Not abnormal. Not dangerous. Not urgent. Just additional evaluation. Those two words felt both comforting and terrifying at the same time. In the United States, doctors often recommend follow-up testing even when they simply want more information. Medical professionals know that repeating a test can prevent unnecessary treatment and reduce mistakes. Studies published by major healthcare organizations have shown that many follow-up appointments confirm normal results after an unclear first screening. I knew this logically. Emotionally, however, logic was losing badly. As I continued reading, I noticed how carefully the hospital had written every sentence. There were no dramatic words. No frightening predictions. Every paragraph encouraged patients not to panic before discussing results with their physician. Looking back, I realized they understood exactly how anxious people become when reading medical letters at home. My English learning habit unexpectedly helped me once again. Instead of rushing through the page, I read every sentence slowly, almost as if I were practicing listening and reading comprehension. I whispered unfamiliar words aloud: evaluation, recommendation, appointment, physician. Speaking them slowly forced my mind to focus on meaning instead of fear. Then I reached the second page. It wasn't another explanation. It was a list. Several appointment options. Different departments. Different specialists. One name near the bottom had been circled in blue ink. I stared at it. Neither my husband nor I recognized the department. I picked up my phone and searched for the name. The description appeared on the screen. And my heart nearly stopped when I understood what that department actually specialized in. The department I never expected. The moment I read the department's name on my phone, my stomach dropped. My search results filled with medical terms I had never wanted to learn, stories from frightened patients, and endless online discussions that only made everything seem worse. My breathing became shallow. My husband quietly took the phone from my hand before I could scroll any further. "Stop," he whispered. "The internet is guessing. Let's hear the doctors instead." Looking back now, that may have been the smartest decision we made. Because what happened the next morning at the hospital was nothing like the terrifying story my imagination had already written. I barely slept that night. Every small sound inside our house seemed louder than usual. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Rain tapped softly against the windows. My mind replayed every doctor's appointment from the past year, searching for clues I might have missed. By sunrise, I had convinced myself of at least 5 different outcomes, and none of them were good. The drive to the hospital felt strangely peaceful. The summer sky over Ohio was bright blue, and people were beginning another ordinary weekday. Parents were dropping children off at school. Joggers crossed the sidewalks with coffee cups in their hands. Life outside my car looked completely normal, while inside, my thoughts refused to slow down. When we entered the hospital, I immediately noticed something I had ignored during previous visits. The staff smiled at every patient. Volunteers greeted people near the entrance. Signs were written in simple English with clear directions. Even when someone looked nervous, the nurses spoke slowly and patiently. For a moment, I forgot I was there because of fear and simply listened to the conversations around me. It almost felt like another English listening lesson. I quietly repeated a few phrases in my head. "Please follow me. The doctor will see you soon. Do you have any questions?" Everyday English suddenly felt more meaningful because it was connected to real life. Research in health communication has shown that calm, clear language can significantly reduce patient anxiety. Hospitals across the United States increasingly train medical staff to avoid confusing expressions and explain information in everyday words whenever possible. Sitting in that waiting room, I understood why. Every simple sentence made it a little easier to breathe. A nurse finally called my name. "Emily Carter?" I stood up so quickly that my purse almost slipped off my shoulder. She led us through a quiet hallway into a consultation room instead of an examination room. That surprised me immediately. There were comfortable chairs, a small table, and large windows looking toward a peaceful garden outside. Nothing about the room felt rushed or frightening. The doctor entered with a warm smile and shook both of our hands. Before discussing any test results, he looked directly at me and asked, "Emily, before I explain anything, can you tell me what you think this letter means?" No doctor had ever asked me that before. I admitted the truth. "I've been imagining the worst." He nodded gently, almost as if he had heard those exact words hundreds of times. Then he opened my medical file. "I understand why you're worried," he said. "But there's something very important you should know before we continue." He turned the computer monitor toward us. On the screen was my latest test report. One line had been highlighted. Another note had been added only that morning. The doctor took a slow breath, pointed to the new update, and said 7 words that instantly changed the direction of the entire conversation. "The first result may not be correct. The result that changed everything. The first result may not be correct. Those 7 words hit me harder than any diagnosis could have. For a few seconds, I couldn't even respond. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, and I realized I had been holding my breath without noticing. After days of imagining the worst, the doctor wasn't telling me my life was over. He was telling me something far more surprising, that one tiny number on one laboratory report might have sent my mind into a storm that never needed to exist. But the next explanation would reveal a truth I never expected about modern hospitals in America, and about myself. The doctor pulled a chart onto the computer screen and pointed to 2 different test results. One value looked slightly outside the normal range, while another sample taken later looked completely different. This doesn't automatically mean something is seriously wrong, he explained calmly. Sometimes a sample is affected by temporary conditions, medications, dehydration, or even simple laboratory variation. Our responsibility is to make sure the information is accurate before making any medical decision. Hearing that felt like someone had opened a window inside a room that had been too dark for days. He continued speaking in clear, simple English, never rushing his words. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. Listening carefully became its own English lesson. I quietly repeated a few expressions in my mind: follow-up testing, accurate results. No conclusions yet. They were phrases I hoped never to need, yet understanding them made me feel more confident instead of more afraid. The doctor smiled gently when he noticed me taking notes. That's actually a great idea, he said. Many patients remember more when they write things down. Research has shown that anxiety can reduce how much information people remember during medical appointments. That is why many healthcare providers encourage patients to bring a family member, ask questions, or take notes. Looking back, I understood why my husband had insisted on coming with me. While fear was trying to erase every sentence, he remembered details I would have forgotten minutes later. The doctor reviewed each page of the letter with us. Nothing suggested an emergency. Nothing required immediate hospitalization. The purpose of the letter had simply been to schedule additional testing so the medical team could confirm whether the original result reflected my actual health. It sounded so reasonable now. Yet only 24 hours earlier, I had mentally rewritten it into the worst story imaginable. I almost laughed at myself. Almost. Because another question still remained. If the first result might be inaccurate, I asked quietly, why did I receive the letter before everything was confirmed? He nodded, as if expecting exactly that question. In the United States, he explained, patients have the right to receive information about their healthcare promptly. We don't want to hide uncertain findings. Instead, we explain them, investigate them, and involve patients in every step. That answer stayed with me. Transparency could feel frightening, but it also meant respect. As the appointment ended, the nurse handed me paperwork for one additional test. We'll schedule this as soon as possible, she said with a reassuring smile. There's no need to panic. We simply want the clearest picture. Those words finally slowed my heartbeat. As we walked toward the parking lot, sunlight filled the hospital entrance, and for the first time in days, I noticed people smiling again instead of wondering what terrible news they might be carrying. I looked at my husband and whispered, maybe I was fighting my imagination more than my health. He smiled. I think today's story isn't over yet. Just then, my phone vibrated with a new notification from the hospital portal. A brand new message had appeared. It hadn't been there an hour earlier. The subject line contained only 5 words. Updated laboratory information available. The message I almost didn't open. I stared at the notification for nearly a full minute without touching it. It wasn't another paper letter this time. It was a secure message inside the hospital portal, glowing on my phone as if it knew I was afraid. My thumb hovered over the screen, then pulled away. After everything that had happened, I realized something surprising. I was no longer scared of bad news. I was scared of uncertainty. And sometimes those are two very different things. What I finally read inside that message completely changed the direction of my week, and revealed a detail no one had mentioned during my appointment. My husband looked at me with patient eyes. "Whenever you're ready," he said. I smiled nervously. I thought opening the letter would be the hardest part. He laughed softly. Apparently, hospitals have more than one way to keep us curious. I tapped the notification. The secure portal loaded slowly. Every spinning circle on the screen seemed to last forever. Around us, people walked across the hospital parking lot carrying coffee cups, backpacks, and flowers for loved ones. Life continued at its usual pace, while mine felt frozen between one loading screen and the next. Finally, the message appeared. "Your physician has reviewed updated laboratory information." I kept reading. The laboratory had completed an additional quality review of my original sample. During that review, technicians discovered that one measurement could have been affected by a technical processing issue. Because patient safety always comes first, the hospital recommended repeating the test rather than relying on uncertain data. I blinked twice. Then I read the paragraph again. Not because it was difficult English, but because my anxious mind couldn't believe what it was seeing. One small technical issue. One careful review. One decision to verify instead of guessing. That was the reason for everything. The doctor hadn't exaggerated. The letter hadn't hidden terrible news. The hospital had simply followed a careful process designed to protect patients from unnecessary conclusions. I felt a wave of relief, followed almost immediately by embarrassment. For days, I had imagined dramatic possibilities that existed only inside my own thoughts. Modern American hospitals often repeat tests whenever results appear inconsistent because accuracy matters more than speed. Medical researchers have shown that confirming unusual findings helps reduce diagnostic errors and ensures patients receive the right care. Suddenly, the system that had frightened me now made perfect sense. Before leaving the hospital, I opened my English learning app while waiting for my husband to bring the car around. The phrase of the day seemed almost unbelievable. "Don't jump to conclusions." I laughed out loud. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I whispered it several times, slowly and clearly. Don't jump to conclusions. It wasn't just vocabulary anymore. It had become my personal lesson. As we drove home through our quiet Ohio neighborhood, I noticed details I had ignored all week. Children were playing basketball in a driveway. A mail carrier smiled as he delivered afternoon packages. American flags moved gently in the warm breeze. Everything looked exactly the same as it had before the letter arrived. The only thing that had changed was me. That evening, my daughters asked why I seemed happier. I hugged them a little longer than usual. Sometimes, I told them, being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means you're willing to wait for the truth. They smiled, even if they didn't completely understand. Later that night, I logged back into the hospital portal one last time before bed, expecting nothing new. Instead, I noticed a fresh appointment had just been added to my schedule. Not with the same doctor. Not in the same department. The appointment description contained only 3 words. Specialist consultation confirmed. I looked at my husband. He looked back at me. Neither of us knew why a specialist was still necessary if the original result might have been wrong. And that unanswered question made me realize the story was far from over. The specialist's surprising question. I expected the specialist to begin by explaining test results, pointing at charts, or asking about symptoms. Instead, the very first question caught me completely off guard. He smiled, closed my medical file for a moment, and asked, "Emily, how much of your fear came from the test? And how much came from the story you told yourself before anyone explained it?" I couldn't answer. My husband couldn't answer either. In that instant, I realized this appointment was about more than my health. It was about the quiet battle between facts and fear, a battle millions of people fight every single day without realizing it. The consultation room felt warm and peaceful, nothing like the dramatic scenes people often imagine from television. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, and I noticed framed photographs of local parks hanging on the walls. The doctor wasn't rushing. He wasn't typing while talking. He looked directly at me, giving me time to think before speaking again. "I've reviewed everything," he said calmly. "The repeated laboratory work looks reassuring. Your follow-up appointment isn't because we expect bad news. It's because we believe patients deserve clear answers." Those words immediately eased the tension in my shoulders. He explained that specialists often review cases involving uncertain results, even when repeat testing appears normal. Having another expert evaluate the information helps improve accuracy and gives patients greater confidence in the final conclusion. Studies published by major healthcare organizations have shown that second opinions and careful follow-up can reduce unnecessary treatments while improving long-term outcomes. Listening to him, I realized something important. Being thorough isn't the same as being alarmed. As he spoke, I quietly noticed familiar English expressions. "Everything looks encouraging. Let's review together. Do you have any concerns?" Months earlier, those sentences might have sounded difficult. Now they felt natural because they were connected to real moments instead of textbook exercises. Learning English through real conversations had become more meaningful than memorizing isolated vocabulary. The specialist opened another report and smiled. "Your repeat testing is consistent," he said. "That's exactly what we hoped to see." I felt tears gathering before I even realized I was crying. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the weight I had carried for days finally began to disappear. My husband reached for my hand again. This time, neither of us was shaking. The doctor encouraged us to continue routine checkups, maintain healthy habits, and never hesitate to ask questions whenever medical language seemed confusing. "Good healthcare," he said, "works best when patients understand what's happening." That sentence stayed with me long after the appointment ended. On our way out, a cheerful nurse handed me a small printed summary of the visit. I smiled when I noticed how clearly everything was written. Short sentences. Everyday vocabulary. It almost looked like reading practice for English learners. That evening, I sat on our back porch while my children played in the yard. The warm American summer air carried the sound of bicycles, birds, and neighbors chatting across the street. For the first time in a week, I wasn't thinking about worst-case scenarios. I was thinking about gratitude. Before going inside, I opened my English learning app one more time. The phrase of the day made me smile. Facts are stronger than fear. I repeated it slowly until I could say it naturally. Then my phone buzzed again. It wasn't from the hospital. It was a voicemail from the doctor's office recorded only minutes earlier. "We've received one final update regarding your case," the receptionist said warmly. "The doctor would like you to hear it personally." I looked at my husband. He looked back at me with the same curious expression. We thought the story was finally ending. Instead, it seemed the most unforgettable sentence of all was still waiting to be spoken. The final update nobody expected. I thought the voicemail would finally close this chapter. I was wrong. The doctor didn't call to warn me about another problem. He called because someone inside the hospital had noticed something unusual after reviewing my entire case. And he believed I deserved to hear it directly instead of reading another message online. At that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes the biggest surprise isn't hidden inside a diagnosis. It's hidden inside the kindness of people who choose to explain instead of letting fear fill the silence. That phone call became one of the most unforgettable conversations of my life. I stepped onto our quiet back porch while my husband stayed inside with the kids. The evening sun painted the sky with soft shades of orange, and the neighborhood felt wonderfully peaceful. I pressed the callback button. The doctor answered almost immediately. "Hi, Emily. I wanted to personally share the final review before it appears in your medical record." I felt my heartbeat speed up again. He continued in the same calm voice I had come to trust. "Our review committee completed every evaluation. The repeat laboratory results are normal, and after comparing all available information, we believe the original abnormal value was caused by a temporary testing inconsistency. There is no evidence suggesting the serious condition you were worried about." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Tears rolled down my face before I even realized I was crying. Not tears of fear. Tears of relief. The doctor didn't rush me. He simply waited. Then he said something I will probably remember for the rest of my life. "You did exactly what every patient should do. You asked questions. You came to your appointments. You stayed involved in your own healthcare." Those words meant more than he probably knew. For days, I had blamed myself for worrying too much. Now I understood that being concerned wasn't the problem. The real challenge had been allowing uncertainty to become certainty inside my imagination. Before ending the call, the doctor encouraged me to continue regular preventive checkups. Across the United States, preventive healthcare helps doctors identify concerns early and confirm that small changes truly matter before recommending treatment. Medical research consistently shows that confirming unexpected results through repeat testing improves patient safety and reduces unnecessary procedures. Instead of feeling frustrated by the extra appointments, I suddenly appreciated why they existed. Later that evening, I opened my English learning notebook. Throughout the week, I had written down useful expressions from real conversations with doctors and nurses. Everything looks normal. Let's repeat the test. Do you have any questions? Thank you for explaining. Reading those simple sentences made me smile. They were no longer just English vocabulary. They had become part of my own story. Learning a language through real experiences somehow made every phrase easier to remember because each word carried an emotion. When my husband came outside, I wrapped my arms around him before saying anything. He immediately understood. "It's good news?" he asked softly. I nodded. "The best news." He laughed with the kind of relief that only comes after carrying invisible weight for far too long. Inside the house, our daughters were arguing over which movie to watch. The television was on. Dinner was waiting on the table. Ordinary family life had returned, yet everything felt different because I now noticed how precious ordinary moments really are. Just before going to bed, I logged into the hospital portal one final time. The official report had already been uploaded. At the very bottom of the document, beneath the doctor's signature, I noticed one additional recommendation I hadn't heard during the phone call. It wasn't about another laboratory test. It wasn't another appointment. It was a referral to a completely different program offered by the hospital. Curious, I clicked the link. As the page opened, I whispered, "Why would they recommend this?" The answer waiting on the next screen would change not only how I cared for my health, but how I planned to live the rest of my life. The program that changed my mind. I expected the final recommendation to be another medical appointment, another blood test, or another reminder to come back in 6 months. Instead, the hospital invited me to something I had never considered before, a free wellness and patient education program designed to help people understand their health before fear took control. At first, I almost ignored it. After all, my test results were reassuring. Why would I need another program? But saying yes to that invitation unexpectedly changed more than my health. It changed how I spoke to my family, how I learned English, and how I faced uncertainty without letting it steal my peace. A week later, I walked into a bright community room inside the same hospital that had once filled me with anxiety. This time, there were no examination tables, no medical equipment, and no tense silence. Instead, people sat in small circles with coffee cups, notebooks, and friendly smiles. Some were recovering from surgery. Others had experienced confusing test results like mine. A few were simply there because they wanted to build healthier habits before problems appeared. The educator leading the session welcomed everyone with a sentence that immediately caught my attention. Knowledge reduces fear. I smiled because those 3 words perfectly described everything I had lived through. She explained how hospitals encourage preventive care, regular screenings, balanced nutrition, physical activity, and open communication with healthcare providers. According to public health research, patients who understand their medical information are often more confident when making healthcare decisions and are less likely to experience unnecessary anxiety caused by misunderstanding. Listening to her, I realized my greatest struggle had never been the letter itself. It had been the empty space where facts should have been. During one activity, we practiced asking simple questions patients can use during medical appointments. Could you explain that again? What does this result mean? Should I be worried? Can you write that down for me? I quietly repeated each sentence several times. They were wonderful English practice because they were real, useful, and easy to remember. I wasn't studying grammar anymore. I was learning language through life, and somehow every phrase stayed in my memory far longer than vocabulary lists ever had. When I returned home that afternoon, my daughters noticed something different. "You look happier," my oldest said. "I think I understand something now," I replied. "What?" "Being healthy isn't only about your body. It's also about protecting your mind from unnecessary fear." She smiled, although I knew she would fully understand those words only years later. That evening, my husband and I took a slow walk through our neighborhood. Families were sitting on front porches. Children chased fireflies across nearby lawns. The summer air felt lighter than it had only days before. "I've been thinking," he said. "So have I. We almost let one uncertain test result steal an entire week of our lives." He was right. Not because we cared too much. Because we forgot to wait for the complete picture. Since then, we've promised each other something simple. Whenever life presents uncertainty, whether it's health, work, or family, we'll ask questions before imagining answers. That promise has brought unexpected peace into our home. Later that night, I opened my notebook and wrote one final English sentence beneath all the others. "Hope grows when truth arrives." I read it aloud several times. Slowly. Clearly. Confidently. Just before I closed the notebook, my phone vibrated once again. This time it wasn't from the hospital. It was an email with the subject line, "A message from your physician." I smiled, expecting a routine follow-up. But the first sentence inside that email would become the most meaningful lesson of this entire journey, and it had almost nothing to do with medicine. The letter I will never forget. If you asked me today what was written inside that hospital letter, I could answer in one sentence. But that wouldn't tell the real story. The most important message wasn't printed on hospital paper, stored inside a patient portal, or spoken by a doctor. It slowly appeared during every moment I spent waiting, worrying, listening, learning, and finally understanding. That ordinary white envelope didn't change my future because of a diagnosis. It changed my future because it exposed something I never noticed before, that fear grows fastest when facts arrive too slowly. But hope grows stronger every time we choose understanding over imagination. A few days after my final appointment, I opened the email from my physician while sitting on our back porch with a cup of coffee. My daughters were drawing colorful pictures on the patio, and my husband was watering flowers nearby. Everything felt beautifully ordinary again. The email wasn't long. It thanked me for trusting the medical team, reminded me to continue routine preventive care, and encouraged me to contact the office whenever I had questions. Then I reached the final paragraph. Never be embarrassed for asking questions. Patients who understand their healthcare often make the strongest decisions because knowledge replaces unnecessary fear. I read those words 3 times. Not because they were difficult English. Because they were exactly what I needed to hear. That sentence became more than medical advice. It became a new way to live. Looking back, I realized I had learned far more than the meaning of one hospital letter. I learned that modern healthcare in the United States isn't simply about treating illness. It's also about communication, teamwork, careful verification, and helping patients understand every step whenever possible. My doctors never laughed at my concerns. My nurses never rushed my questions. Instead, they patiently explained each result until uncertainty slowly became confidence. Unexpectedly, my English improved too. During those weeks, I learned vocabulary I will probably remember forever because every word belonged to a real experience. Appointment. Follow-up. Results. Everything looks normal. Do you have any questions? I practiced each phrase slowly while driving, cooking dinner, or walking through my neighborhood. Learning English no longer felt like memorizing textbooks. It felt like collecting meaningful moments from everyday American life. Somehow, emotions helped every sentence stay in my memory. One evening, my oldest daughter asked me a question I wasn't expecting. "Mom, were you scared?" I smiled honestly. "Very scared." "What made you feel better?" I thought about the letter, the phone calls, the doctors, the nurses, my husband holding my hand, and the countless moments when I almost allowed fear to tell the entire story. Then I answered, "The truth." She nodded thoughtfully before returning to her homework. Sometimes children understand life's biggest lessons with remarkable simplicity. As summer slowly turned toward autumn, our family returned to ordinary routines. Weekend grocery shopping, school activities, family movie nights, walks around our quiet neighborhood. Nothing looked extraordinary anymore, yet I appreciated every ordinary day more deeply than ever before. Whenever I check our mailbox now, I still notice hospital envelopes. But they no longer make my heart race. Instead, they remind me of one unforgettable lesson. Never let an unopened letter write the ending before you read the first page. If this story helped you practice English while reminding you that hope often waits on the other side of uncertainty, then my experience was worth sharing. Sometimes the simplest conversations teach us the greatest lessons, not only about language, but about courage, family, kindness, and trusting facts instead of fear. And perhaps that's why this will always remain the hospital letter I never forgot. That is all for today. I'll make many more stories like this in the future. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next one.